Please welcome Bill Ayer.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you, President Sten. I really like this organization for lots of reasons, one of which is your adherence to a timeline. So I have until, I said I got until about 1:20 or so, no, 1:26. So it's very precise, and I'm going to try to stick with that, and hopefully we'll get some Q&A in there as well. If we don't, I'm happy to stay around later if you want to talk to me. You're all customers, and so one of the great opportunities for me is to hear from customers. That's what drives our business, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Of course, the other thing I just love about Rotary is your community service, and we try to take a lead from you in that. We're trying to be involved in community organizations in Seattle and all over our system, but you folks set the bar, and we're trying to follow that. So speaking of customers, how many 75Ks or golds do we have in the room? My goodness. Well, thank you. How about just MVPs? Regular old MVPs? Thank you all very much for your loyalty. This is an intensely competitive business. Hopefully it's going okay for you. I know we had some bumps in the road years ago. We're trying to put that in the rearview mirror, but that was kind of part of our transformation, which I'll touch on here. But mainly wanted to say thank you for your loyalty. Thank you for your business. We have tremendous employees out there that are just trying to do a great job every day. Their mindset is every passenger, every day, every flight. And hopefully that's coming through for you. So our history, starting in the state of Alaska back in 1932, actually has a lot to do with how we operate today. And it's back to that word community again. Because in Alaska, many of you have been to Alaska, right? You know there's no roads up there to speak of, and everybody and everything moves by air. So rather than just thinking ourselves as flying airplanes, moving metal, as they say, from point A to point B, we are very much in the community service business. We are integrated in the communities and in both the social and economic fibers of the places that we serve, and that is in our DNA. So as we've expanded the company over the years, we try to keep thinking that way. Even if we're in Newark, we start to think about a community. And it's more than just moving airplanes. It's about really serving the people on board and understanding that they all have a mission. They're going somewhere that's important. It's a wedding, a funeral, a business meeting, whatever it is, and try to have that understanding as we try to provide the air service. So as you have that kind of a background, it's all about people. And so we've had a focus for almost 80 years now on customers for sure, but also on employees. And that's really the mechanism. It's a simple model of employees, customers, and if you get those things right, then you have a pretty good shot of treating investors right. And investors have largely been left out of this industry forever, and we're trying to change that. But also understanding that it isn't just you just watch your stock price all day. It's you work on doing the right thing for employees who then take great care of customers, and you end up with a good situation for investors. So I'm pleased to say that thanks to our wonderful employees and thanks to you, our customers, the company's doing quite well. But I would tell you that it's never without challenges, and our mindset is that it's about continual improvement, and it's about adaptability, but we sure have come a long ways in the last decade or so and through some pretty tough challenges and have emerged a much stronger airline for it. And I will talk about that. By the way, if some of you have heard me speak in the last few months, you have my permission to doze off for the next 5 or 10 minutes because you're going to have heard this before. But I do have some new stuff at the end that we'll talk about in terms of some projects that we're working on. So even in the best of times, the airline industry is difficult. And I kind of rattle this off. It is capital intensive, labor intensive. It's highly regulated. It's very highly taxed, more than alcohol or cigarettes, believe it or not. We have been an easy mark for the government to raise taxes. And we haven't defended ourselves very well politically, and I think we're getting around to doing that better through our trade association. Time will tell. Our bottom line for the industry and for us is very sensitive to the price of oil. For us, a $1 move on the barrel price of oil is $10 million a year to the bottom line. And it moved $10 a few weeks ago, or a couple weeks ago, in one day. So the industry is also very competitive. For some reason, people like getting into this business, as difficult as it is. So it's really competitive. And the dynamic that's changed here is that low-cost carriers have been the growth segment of the industry. And since 2001, low-cost carriers as a group have doubled in size, and the old line legacy airlines have been really zero growth whatsoever. It's been just about flat overall, and all the growth has been with the low-cost carriers. So for us, the darkest days, at least in my tenure, were immediately following 9/11, and survival was the big concern. And we decided right then and there that we were going to start down a new strategic path. we were going to figure out how to build a model that would be sustainable. We had high costs. We'd made some money during some good years like 98 and 99, and sometimes making money, you can misinterpret that as like really superior management, when in fact it's one of those, all boats rise with the tide, and it turned out to be more of that, and we credited ourselves more than we should have, so we were a little slow getting on with building a new model, but we did get to it, and we were absolutely going to find a way that would work over the long term, and I guess I'd say, here we are, a major recession and a couple of oil shocks later, I think we are finding a path. But it is a challenge every day, and we're careful not to ever declare victory, because it's just then when something else will happen. So the focus is on continually improving things, and it is on controlling what we can control. And we have discovered that this business is a lot more controllable than we thought initially, maybe 10 years ago. So what are the priorities? First and foremost is safety. Nothing is more important than safety, and safety really is the foundation for everything that we do. So as I've said, the business is all about people, and it's creating loyal customers through engaged employees. I've heard people say that airlines are really the ultimate team sport, because you've got to get everybody, all the employees working together. You can't operate in silos, in divisional silos in a company like this to be successful with customers, and in turn for investors who, as I said, have been largely left out of the equation. So it's a people business, and the biggest challenge, I would say, people sometimes, what's the biggest challenge that we've faced over the last decade or so? As part of this transformation, the biggest challenge was recognizing that we were going to have to do some things that were going to be negative to the very group of people that we count on every day to do this great job for our customers. So we had to have layoffs, we had to have changes in benefits. We didn't do a bankruptcy. Us and American are the only two legacy carriers that did not do a bankruptcy, and I'll talk more about why that was important here in just a minute. But we did the hard work ourselves, and in so doing, I think we've learned a lot about how to make change in a company like this and deal with future challenges, which there will be plenty of. So as I said, we're still the mindset. You don't want to get complacent. We've had a lot of success. We've gotten a lot of positive press on things. We've got a lot of things going well, not only financially, but the operational stuff, the J.D. Power Awards that we've won for customer service and so forth. But we've made it very clear we're not going to get complacent. The industry continues to be challenging. It continues to be just as competitive as ever, and we're going to keep at it and continue to make changes. So let me review quickly 6 lessons. Sometimes it's 8. I see today it's 6. So we'll skinny it back a little bit. The Reader's Digest version, 6 lessons learned at Alaska Airlines. And these might be helpful as you think about your business and trying to make change. So the first is to be totally and completely customer focused. And I would tell you that the primary motivation for all of the changes that we've made, all of the improvements we've made in our operation have been driven by customers. And customers are, and sometimes it's trite people say this, but they are really the only reason that we're in existence. They drive every decision that we make, directly or indirectly. And at the end of the day, they decide how successful we're going to be. So we started this earlier in the decade. We've got to reduce costs. Why? Because customers want low fares. And when you look at fare structures across, people just, with the internet, pricing transparency became easy, and everybody could find the lowest fares. And so that was a big thing. We had to get our cost structure changed, and we had to get it lower. Improving the operation. So one of the unintended consequences of some of the things we did to improve our cost structure was an off-schedule airline. For those of you that flew us in 2004, 5, part of 6 probably, we had schedule issues, we had canceled flights, we had baggage issues, and we said to ourselves, we didn't expect this. We did the right thing in terms of our cost structure, and we thought we did it in a pretty decent way, but we've got something here that we didn't count on. Now we just need to go fix that. So it's like you never give up on stuff. You just say, well, now we need to respond to that, and we need to go fix it. And as I said, with this, number 1 on-time airline for the last 12 months, and actually all the way through the first quarter now, I think we've solved that. But, again, you never take it for granted. We work hard at it every single day. So the old adage that the customer's opinion is the only one that matters, I think, is especially true for our company and in our industry. Number 2, this is a Jim Collins deal. Get the right people on the bus. So change is all about people. That means leadership is really important, and the tone at the top is really important. And that tone has to start all the way with the board of directors, and we just have a terrific board of directors at Alaska Air Group. And speaking of tone, one of the things, and I think I stole this from Steve Ballmer at Microsoft, reading some of his stuff, but this notion of being realistic and optimistic has really been helpful to us as we've kind of carved our way through all these changes. So this is with employees. You want to be very realistic about what the issues are and what do you need to do. Let's get it all out on the table so we can fully address the issue and fully solve the problem. But with the next breath, let's be optimistic about what we can do, what we can become, and where we can go. And that tends to build on itself as you start having success. You can say, well, look back at all that we've done. And there's all the reason in the world to be optimistic about the future given the accomplishments and successes that we've had. But that's a great combination when you think about it. Realistic, so you're not shading the truth here. You're saying, no, this is exactly what, and this is important. You won't fully solve a problem unless you fully identify it. So realism and optimism, that's a good lesson for us. Third is to create a sense of urgency, the burning platform idea. We had lost over $200 million in a 4-year period, and frankly, we could have qualified for bankruptcy, I suppose, if we wanted to. We didn't think about it for more than 30 seconds because it didn't fit our values. But you need to get going on stuff. And we said, and don't worry about being perfect, because you can analyze things to death, and if your standard is perfection, you won't do very much. You'll be too worried about making a mistake. So get it going on it, get the direction right, and expect resistance and be persistent. Patience is not one of my virtues. I've had to learn to be a little bit more patient when you're working on an issue that takes some time, an initiative that takes some time to accomplish. But resistance is human nature. And don't go out and vote and say, what do people want to do when you've got a crisis on your hands? There's a time for consensus in decision making, but a crisis is not that. It takes leadership, the board, everybody moving in the same direction and go after it. 4 is really an important one that we learned, especially regarding the operation, which is what you measure gets done. And so you want to be very clear about goals, focus on a small number of key initiatives. We all go to these annual planning sessions, right, where you go off to a hotel for a week and you write down, the next year's objectives. And what people tend to do, and we did this for years, you write down way too much stuff. And then you come back to your desk and you go, I forgot that I still have a full-time job here. How am I going to do all the rest of this, right? So we said, let's narrow the focus here. Let's decide to do 1 or 2 big things in any given year that are cross-company, that require people not to be in those siloed organizations, that are cross-company, and let's work on some big stuff, like fixing our cost problem, like learning how to budget really well, like fixing the operation, like going after revenue and really understanding what customers care about and how do we provide that kind of value. So a couple of big ideas, not 20 or 30 things that at the end of the year you say, I didn't really do very much on this. And we did that for many years. Many of you might do the same thing in your planning process. Focus on 1 or 2 biggies and really nail them. 5 I've talked about a little bit, which is focus on what you can control. It would be easy to think that our business is not very controllable and you can sort of sit around and your job could be just to report out on what happened. Well, you don't need management to report out on what happened. You need management to drive future change. So, as I said, the business, as we got into these things, we found out that the business is actually a lot more controllable than we thought going in. And unlike some of our competitors, we decided that hope was not a good strategy. And the final one is, number 6, is to be adaptable, which means you be ready to capitalize on opportunities when they present themselves. A great example for us recently is Hawaii. We've been there just about 3 years now, I think. And that was an opportunity because a couple of other airlines went broke and liquidated. Aloha Airlines and ATA Airlines used to fly to Hawaii off the West Coast. They just went away. And we were quick to jump on that. We said, let's try that. And so we tried a couple of flights out of Anchorage and a couple out of Seattle. And those that look at our route network today, you'll know how much we do. It's now 15% of our whole system is Hawaii. And it's not just Seattle and Anchorage. Here it's Bellingham, interestingly, and Portland. And then it's down in California, it's San Jose, Oakland, Sacramento, San Diego. And not just to Honolulu, but nonstops, which is what this 737-800 does so well, is that nonstop into Kona, the nonstop to Maui and Kauai. But that's just being opportunistic, and that's being nimble and smaller, and the mindset of let's go after some stuff. So adaptability requires innovation and thinking about new and better ways of doing things, and also thinking about productivity and efficiency, and all that stuff has to come together. So that's the 6 lessons learned, and so now you can wake up again if you've already heard this, and I'll talk about some new things, which is technology and energy and the environment. And so we have a long history of innovation, both for operational improvement and also for customer service. So operational technology, airplane stuff I'll talk about here, but also customer-facing technology, which is really important. We were the first, people don't remember this, but we were actually the first to offer tickets on the internet way back in 1995. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. and we improved it from there. We followed that with really the first major deployment of kiosks at the airport. And you know where that evolved with the airport of the future concept, as we call it, at Seattle, first Anchorage and now Seattle. And that all came from just talking to customers and watching customers. I used to stop at SeaTac, I still do, but 6 o'clock in the morning, go out and watch people get in line at our old ticket counter. And people that are running for a meeting, they were a little bit late, maybe they had traffic, and they're just scared to death when you look at them. And you talk to them, and they go, darn, I wasn't counting on a 20-minute wait at your ticket counter line. Can't you do this any better? I might miss my flight and my day's destroyed if that happens. So we said, okay, there's stress in this system that needs to come out. And if we're really going to create loyalty with customers, we've got to have some really much more friendly processes for people getting on and off airplanes. So that led us to say, why do we have a ticket counter at all? That's something out of the 60s or the 50s, when people used to pay cash money for tickets. You needed to protect the key, you needed a cash drawer, right? That's what the ticket counter was, a barrier. Well, that's not very friendly, and certainly when people line up and, behind it, it's a mess. So we came up with this idea, and other people had done it in Europe a little bit. It wasn't brand new, but it certainly was new for us and pretty much new in the U.S., this idea of a flow-through, low-stress deal, a quick bag check, and on-off through security. We're going to do the same thing in L.A., by the way. We're moving terminals at LAX. It won't happen for more than a year, I think, from now, but the construction's underway, and we'll have exactly the same setup as we have at Seattle at LAX. So, So let's talk about the airplane. So we have been early adopters of virtually all the flight deck technology that's come along over the last 10 or 20 years. And this really started out of necessity, back to our roots in Alaska. So how many people have been to Juneau? Juneau, okay, great. How many people have not had to make a missed approach at Juneau and go somewhere else? Most of you, I hope. So back in the dark ages, this is the capital of Alaska, state capital, right? Capital city. There was actually a movement afoot to move the capital to Anchorage because of unreliable air service due to the weather and the terrain and the approach procedures where you couldn't get in low visibility and low ceiling conditions. Well, this GPS technology called RNP, Required Navigation Performance, solved that problem. And we designed, along with the FAA, we designed approaches into Juneau that got us down to much lower minimums in the weather. And we virtually eliminated the problem, not totally, but pretty much eliminated the problem of diversions at Juneau. So we said to ourselves, where else can we do that? Well, a lot of other airports in Alaska that had kind of primitive navigation aids for these approaches in the weather. And then we said, and what we're saying right now is, what about the lower 48, and what is this next-gen project that FAA is doing with the new air traffic control system? They call it next-gen. They've been working on it for some time. How could we use what we already have equipped in all of our airplanes and all of our crews trained to fly? How could we use that at a place like Seattle? How about that? And to shorten, not that Seattle's all that congested, but it could actually be a proof of concept idea for the FAA, which they really like and they're working with us on. But it could also shorten the arrival tracks. It could provide a more continuous descent and a more efficient, less fuel burn, lower emissions, and quieter. And those are three pretty good objectives for an airline these days, given the price of fuel and the environmental sensitivity that we all have. So that's what we're working on. It's called Greener Skies. Megan Lawrence is here, by the way. I should have introduced her earlier. Megan's our Managing Director of Government Affairs, and she's working really hard on this with the FAA from a policy standpoint. And they're out here. We have a meeting tomorrow, in fact, to get an update. And there's a lot of there's a lot of government. When you're working with the government on something, it's going to take a while. But I think we got the right people engaged in this, and we're looking forward to seeing that come to fruition. So that's the Greener Skies project. The other thing I would tell you about is on the fleet. We've got great Boeing 737s. We got 400s, 700s, 800s, and 900s, and some new 900 ERs coming, which are the extended range, bigger airplanes. The most fuel efficient fleet in the industry. The Wall Street Journal calls our fleet Priuses with wings. That's how good the fuel economy is. And the Horizon airplanes are very fuel efficient as well, with all Q400s now at Horizon, the turboprop. And that airplane is the equivalent of like 60 miles per gallon for a car, is what that airplane gets. So we made huge progress on that. The last piece of it, though, how efficient can you be? We got the airplanes, we got the procedures. We're trying to fly fewer miles and operate the airplanes as efficiently as we possibly can. The other part of it is fuel. And so we are involved in a project. Everything's an acronym in our business, right? So it's Sustainable Aviation Fuels Northwest, SAFN, right? SAFN. And it's a biofuel initiative that we are a part of. We kind of pioneered along with Boeing and the Port of Seattle and the Port of Portland and Spokane, which, by the way, it's great to have these regional coordination on things like this. It's really, really good. And the whole idea is to just let's go out and evaluate the possibility of a biofuel industry right here, given the feedstock possibilities. What could we do? And so there's an evaluation going on all the way from what do you grow, how do you get it into the pipeline, how do you get it into the airplane, how much is it going to be? And it's not going to bear fruit overnight. This might be a multi-year deal, very likely will be, but we're getting started on it. And I think it's really important. We're not going to be so dependent on foreign oil. And from an environmental standpoint, it could be much, much better than what we're doing today. So we're trying to provide a little bit of a leadership role on that. The last thing I'll mention, we'll get to Q&A, is there's a bill in Washington. There are lots of bills in Washington. There's one that has to do with the FAA funding. It's called the FAA reauthorization bill. It's been stuck in Congress for years. They've just done short-term extensions of the thing. The most interesting part of this bill for us is more access to Washington Reagan Airport. And so we are working hard, and Megan is working hard. As you may know, we have two flights a day from Reagan to Seattle right now, and one LA Reagan flight. We'd like to do another one. And so this bill has more slots in it. Of course, you can imagine the big carriers want to do this too, and some of the folks that already have a big presence at Washington want to just convert what they're doing short haul to these long haul markets. We don't think that's a good idea. We think a carrier like Alaska that is, a lower cost airline and great customer service, we don't have much operation there today at all. So this is more about competition and sort of the balance of that. And rather than big airlines getting bigger, we think it's an opportunity for us to do a little bit more. So, and Senator Cantwell and Murray are just being great helps to us on that. So I'm going to stop with that and look forward to some questions. Thank you.
All right, do we have questions? And again, what you want to do is draw the attention of somebody that has a mic, and then we'll go back and forth between people. Mark?
Hi, I will be on your 8:40 flight to Reagan tomorrow morning.
Excellent, thank you.
And I would also like to know, when can we start getting frequent flyer miles for our pets that travel in the belly?
Pet frequent flyer miles.
Since we do have to buy them tickets.
You're right. We actually do hear that a lot. And I'll take that back to our marketing folks. I mean, I think there's a huge interest in that, and it's not out of the question. They do have to pay, though.
Stand over here.
Okay. Jeff.
Thanks for joining us today. Anyone who's flown lately has got to be left wondering how well Nordstrom would be doing if they had to go through the same type of screening process before they actually got into the store. How do you work with the government to try and help them strike the right balance between security versus access and throughput? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a very good question. And they're dealing with a lot of issues that we're not always privy to. So I've had, we've had a fair bit of patience with some of their processes. The best thing we do is we work at a place like Seattle. We work very directly with the head person there, the Federal Security Director for TSA, and we make sure they know our schedule, not just generally, but day by day, especially as we get into peak periods. So we know exactly what we have on the books, what we have advanced load information for by hour, by half hour. We want to cut that. We know the load on every flight. And so we share that with them so they can staff the checkpoints appropriately. And they have been pretty responsive to that. And they've got all kinds of budget issues and stuff they're trying to balance too. But so in terms of getting the lines figured out and balanced, they've been doing better on that, but we give them input to help with it. And I think they do understand the customer service part of this, and it's not perfect by any means. And it varies, individually and airport to airport sometimes. But I think they are trying hard, and they've got a big job.
Bill, just a quick question. I'm a loyal Portland-Seattle flyer for both business and personal, and it goads me to pay what we have to pay for a 50-minute flight.
Right.
No different than the other carrier. Ever been any thinking about doing a loyalty program for somebody who flies in one direction all the time to reduce the cost? That's the first question. Second one is discuss fuel costs in terms of what you guys do to hedge that and what role that plays. And lastly, the Horizon-Alaska combination, is there ever any discussion about merging the two companies, and what do you get by keeping them separate? I know it's a lot. Thanks.
Okay. So on the Portland-Seattle fares, we are trying to have competitive fares. If you buy your ticket in advance, it could be a lot cheaper, but I know business people don't do that. But we need to keep looking at that. High airfares is not something we're proud of. We want to have great value, and that's a market we probably need to look at, just like some of the state of Alaska markets. We think our fares are a little high. And we don't want to be accused of being a monopolist. We want to have good value for people. So I appreciate your comment on that. Fuel hedging, real quickly, what we do there. So the best hedge of all is not to burn it in the first place. So we got the best airplanes possible for that. But in terms of the actual economic hedge that we do, the financial hedge, we basically do something very simple. They're call options, so they're caps. We buy oil in advance, and that's the price that will not exceed price for us. It's not a locked-in price; it's a not exceed price. We pay it's insurance. Think of it as insurance, and we pay an insurance premium to do that. CNBC had a story on us a couple of weeks ago. They said we have the best hedge position in the industry. Sort of a good news, bad news thing. You hope you don't have to use it. You hope oil isn't, but if it does, you've got a hedge there. We've saved $400 million since we've been hedging. Over time, it'll cost us the premium over a long period of time, but when it takes the spikes out of the volatility. The last point on Horizon is a great company. I started there in 1982. We don't have plans to really merge the certificates. There's common ownership, obviously. We're trying to do things to make it easier, to make it more efficient. Combining backroom functions, we've done a lot of that in finance and HR and planning and so forth. And we're the brand, you've probably seen this now. The Horizon airplanes are going to say Alaska on the side of them and a little Horizon, but still a Horizon operating certificate. And we think that's going to just allow us to expand Horizon more easily as we have the opportunity to do that.
Good afternoon. I'm one of the folks who has seen you speak, and it was at a small event that you and I got a chance to talk afterwards a couple years ago in Bellevue. And of all the things I remember, honestly, there's something I remember that you haven't shared with us today, and that's your work with the organization that I believe is called Angel Flight.
Okay.
And I'd love you to just tell us that, because we're a service organization, and I would love to hear more about that organization.
Okay, sure. Well, I'm a pilot, a small airplane pilot, and I've had an airplane for 25 years or something, I think. I've had it since it was new. And so any private pilots in the room? There have to be. Well, pilots love to fly their airplanes. Angel Flight allows me to fly the airplane and do something. It's not just what we call a $100 hamburger going off to have lunch somewhere. Now it's a $500 hamburger, I think, with the price of fuel. But you actually do something good for somebody along the way. So what the organization does is it arranges travel for these volunteer pilots in their airplanes to go pick up patients. And in my case, people that do it out of Seattle, we're bringing them to Seattle for medical care. It's mostly cancer treatment, and it's people that live in places like Walla Walla and Sandpoint, Idaho, and Missoula, Montana, that don't have access to those facilities. And it's really fun. You develop some great friendships with patients. It puts life in a little bit of a perspective when you see some of the issues that people are dealing with, and you feel good about doing something for somebody else.
Yes, sir. Assuming that in the longer term, it'll be good for passengers if we have a profitable industry. What's it going to take to have you have a profitable industry?
I think we're on the road to that. I think if you go back 10 years, maybe even 5 years, if somebody said oil was going to be at $100 a barrel, most knowledgeable people would say, well, if that's the case, there won't be an airline industry. People couldn't imagine how we could change the business models to actually not just break even, but in our case and some others, actually make money at $100 oil. So I think people have gotten with it. Now, it took all these bankruptcies across the industry to do that, but I think people have got their models kind of figured out. If we could get a little bit, I almost hesitate to say this, if we get a little bit of help from the government every so often, it might help some of the other carriers. Our point on it was, you know what? Let's not wring our hands over what we can't control. Let's just go do stuff. And we found that there's enough things that are controllable. But it is important, and we don't view this as, let's go kill the competitor. We need a healthy industry. This thing is a big driver of the U.S. economy. We need a healthy airline industry. There's no doubt about it.
I have two questions, one for my future Rotarian guest here. She would like to know, why are so many flights to Spokane canceled? And the second question is, you want our feedback as customers. I'm a Gold member myself, and I enjoyed the open lunches you had for us to come and share, but where else do customers go to let you know? I'm on your Facebook page, but where else can we let you know what we'd like you to know?
Yeah, here's a good place. We're a small company. We're 3% of the U.S. industry. We have 12,000 employees. We're trying to say this is a small place, and so you ought to get email addresses. You ought to get phone numbers. You ought to develop relationships with people. If you're a frequent flyer, you ought to know people in our mileage plan, and that's exactly what we want to be doing, is getting to know our customers. I can share some of that information with you. On the Spokane question, so Horizon has moved to an all Q400 fleet, which is the turboprop. I've been flying the Q400. It is a great fuel-efficient airplane. It is still having some teething problems. They're not safety related, but they're reliability issues, mechanical reliability issues. We are working very closely with the manufacturer to solve some of those things. But since Horizon has the predominant service between Seattle and Spokane, sometimes cancellations hit that market. we coordinate our SOCs, our operation control folks, so that if there is a Horizon cancellation and there's not an easy reaccommodation, and if we have an extra Alaska airplane, we'll go throw that out there, and we'll fill that airplane up and get people moving. So I apologize, Horizon. It's getting better. We've created some more spare airplanes for Horizon to get through this, and we've got a lot of airplanes going through some mod lines to get the latest updates from the manufacturer. I think it'll get better.
Bill, Tom Jaffa, very proud to be a gold member. Love going to those luncheons also and giving feedback, and you're the only airline that seems that much interested, and we really appreciate it. I do an awful lot of long-haul flights. My mom is in Boston. I take care of her. Boston, Newark, D.C., Minneapolis, Atlanta.
Wow.
I know every digi-film that ever was invented, but two things. One, Ron Calvin and your folks do a great job with those ports. A little bit of a challenge with those Delta and other employees that have to work for Alaska. So question one, are you going to be able to put Alaska employees in there? And secondly, Alaska's my first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth choice airline. I'm a little bit nervous about in the future that Alaska, unless it buys those other ones, becoming like those other mediocre airlines. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, very quickly, I know we're short on time. The operation, who handles the operation in some of those other cities where we only have 1 or 2 flights a day, the economics are just such that it doesn't make sense to put our own people and our own equipment in there. So we work with partners like Delta. In fact, they're doing more of the ground handling now for us than anybody else. We're trying to get consistent. We're trying to get the signage consistent. We're trying to have them dedicate agents to our flights, the customer service agents, so they know our procedures really well. And there's a lot of training going on there. I think it's basically going fine. It's not exactly like having our own people, but it's close enough where the economics, I think, makes sense. And then the merger question, I think if you saw in the paper, our view is if we continue to perform, we don't have to worry about being bought by anybody. We can't control that. There's no guarantees, right? There's no guarantees on this stuff. It's business. But our performance has led to a very healthy stock price, and that's pretty good protection against somebody buying us. As far as us buying somebody else, you never say never, but I would just say that we got this thing going very well. History is not good on these things. History is system integration and, most importantly, labor integration doesn't go well. Airline after airline have merged, and certainly the accountants had spreadsheets that showed all kinds of great results, and almost never has it worked out that way. And it's culture. And as soft and fuzzy as that sounds, culture is really important in a business like this, and how employees feel about coming to work every day, and it can easily get messed up with mergers. So the track we're on right now is works for shareholders, certainly works for employees, hopefully works for customers, and that's our plan. All right. We might. One more? Okay.
Yes, Bill. I fly Kenmore quite a bit.
Cool.
Noticed the Alaska Airlines sticker on the side. Did you merge or
Nope.
purchase them? And if so, what was the strategy?
Nope, that's a mileage plan tie-in. So you can get miles in the Alaska mileage plan when you fly Kenmore. They are a great airline, by the way. I love that operation. Being a pilot, it's just very cool what they do. That's a really good operator. All right. Is that it? Good. Thank you, sir. All right. You bet.
Seattle Rotary Online is made possible in part by a grant from First Choice Health, working with the Washington Health Information Collaborative to use technology to bring better health care to patients throughout the Pacific Northwest. First Choice Health.